You're looking for an electric vehicle. You don't want hybridization, you don't want a gasoline engine, and then you're looking for a Volvo. And then you find the C40, which in many regards is just like the XC40. I'm not quite sure what's different, but I'll tell you this. If you're someone that doesn't want a car, you don't want a hatchback, you don't want a wagon or a traditional CUV, but then you're like, no, I'd like a car that was kind of like a coupe, but doesn't have all the usability of a CUV, but then gets raised ride height and better road presence. That's the C40 in a nutshell. I don't even know what I just said. But what I do know is the interior space, because the exterior is quite subjective. If you have never seen a Volvo before, you may look at this and think, wow, this is pretty clean. And that's the overall aesthetic that Volvo is trying to do. There are minimal gimmicks, technology aside, in a vehicle like this in modern Volvo design. You have a great use of materials, so let's start with that. Looking at the door, you see this blue carpet that carries over onto the interior space, and you think, oh, that's cute. Well, it is, because it's recycled materials. They're trying to do that now more in automotive design, reclaimed or recycled materials, so they're not constantly hitting resources. So you have these leather feeling textures or vinyl textures on most of the seating surfaces, the doors. You have alloy and alloy look materials like on the speaker grills or the handles. And then you have this kind of matte chrome plastic that's on the steering wheel and much of the input points. A lot of matte textures here, like on the steering wheel, great. It's not shiny, so you don't get a bunch of fingerprints on it. But they do have piano black in like the center console, which always looks dirty on pretty much every car. It's around the center bezel here for the center infotainment screen. And then on the center parts of the seat, you have almost like Alcantara. It's like a micro suede feeling across the seat. And then this recycled material for the headliner. So overall, it's a very interesting space. Then you get to this plastic that's on the doors by the handle and along the center dash that gets lit up at night. It is a texture that looks like grayscale banding from compression on like a video that you upload to the internet. And that was the first thing I thought. I'm like, is it a screen? But no, when you look it up close, it is mirroring that kind of compression artifact. Let's talk about storage. It's good, usable. There's a huge pocket in the door for bottles. Your center armrest is pretty big. It comes with the traditional Volvo garbage can for boogers and like scabs. You have a wireless charger here towards the front and some like mini pockets that you can put, I don't know, gum or makeup or whatever. But let's get to the technology before I talk about overall cargo capacity. The center gauge cluster has been updated from the older Volvo products. The DPI is higher, which means it's much cleaner looking. The text is sharp, it's legible, and you can go almost a full screen map here from Google Maps. Now let's get on to the infotainment. This is updated from the older Volvo products called Volvo Sensus, where they created this kind of user experience that required you to kind of swipe back and forth between three panels. So they have now dumped their own self-made version of this and gone to Android Automotive. And this runs Android version 11, and it is designed 100% for vehicles. And you'll see other manufacturers doing this. And what they've done is they've reskinned it to make it look like the Volvo Sensus, their old one, with Google OS behind it. Now, when you dig deeper in the menus, it looks exactly what you expect from an Android smartphone, including settings and all of that. When you look at the menu structure, it is kind of like this panel system that they do, where you kind of have your four most used things, which is Google Assistant, your phone, what media is playing, and then of course Google Maps. That great thing about this is because it's a connected car to the internet, Google Maps is always there and the Google Assistant's always there, assuming you have an Android smartphone and Google accounts, because it will ask you to log in with your Gmail or Google account, and then it pairs up and you can download apps and all that fun stuff. And if you do, like me, I have a Samsung phone, it's a pretty seamless experience. But if you're an iOS user like Jack and his compatriots, they complained endlessly that there's no real iOS support in terms of Apple CarPlay. He said he had a ton of crashes, Maps stopped working, his phone stopped working or connecting to the car, which is a complete opposite of my experience. As soon as I got in here, my phone connected like lightning fast. So again, they're talking about doing over-the-air updates, which the part of having Android Automotive in here is you're going to get security patches, you're going to get stability fixes, product improvements way quicker than what you get in a forked version of Android where manufacturers hacked it up themselves, like Acura did with theirs. They never have updates for it. It's such a pain in the ass. This fixes it, but the center screen is definitely older technology. The aliasing is bad on the text. It's not sharp. It's not very clear to read compared to the center gauge cluster. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. You could do literally a tech review on just infotainment these days. Seating comfort is great. I'm 5'9". The backs are a little stiff. The lower parts are soft. The bolsters are really soft. So if you come in here and you're short and you blast like your lower genitalia or your butt, it's not going to do any damage to you there like some higher bolsters do. The back seat space is pretty good. It's comfortable. Again, the seat materials are a good blend of supportiveness and softness. If you're a bigger person in the front, obviously it's going to sacrifice your back space. With the seats down in the back and the hatch up, you can see it's a very usable size vehicle. And I think many people will like the fact that this isn't a huge product. So you can get it in a city, but it still has the cargo capacity of most CUVs. And Jack's going to go in the shop right now and tell you what this is based on and how it's all made.
Underneath the all-new Volvo C40, this is the second dedicated EV Volvo has recently released here in the United States, and it has a mechanical twin, the XC40, that is a more ruggedized version of this vehicle, which is less aerodynamic. This vehicle is about 6% more efficient than that car, which means it has a total EPA range of 226 miles. Both vehicles are built on Volvo's CMA platform, which is the same platform that they used for the Polestar 2. This platform can be EV, it can be hybrid, or can be internal combustion. In this vehicle's case, it's strut front, multi-link rear. Everything's covered up as you were expecting, and there's a good attention to detail when it comes to both aerodynamic materials and NVH materials. The total battery pack size is 78 kilowatt hours. It has dual motors, which produce in the low 400 horsepower and about 492 foot-pounds of torque, which means this car can do 0 to 60 in the mid to low fours, which addresses one of the biggest problems with modern Volvos, and that is their internal combustion drivetrains. They aren't reliable, they don't produce that much power, their gearboxes are slow, and they aren't that fuel efficient. So hopefully this addresses a lot of those problems. So with that, I think it's time for Mark to go take this thing out for a drive.
The Volvo C40 Pure EV. See how it gets off the line. Holy shit, this thing is quick. It's really quick for what this is. I really wasn't expecting it because I haven't done much of these launches. I've been trying to conserve and drive normal. But so this categorically fixes a majority, actually almost all of the problems that I have with Volvo drivetrains. As a former owner of an XC90 T6, supercharger, turbocharger, 2-liter, that struggled to get 19 miles per gallon, didn't feel particularly sprightly, had a ton of issues with like engine tuning based on temperature, it would get inconsistent. So now you get rid of that. And what you get is a lot of the things that people love about Volvo interiors. You get the engineering in terms of safety, structure, and all the things that you care about on a daily commute. If you have a family, you get all of the things that Volvo bakes in, and you just go flying in this thing. It's quiet because of it. You don't have the rattly ass 4-cylinder effect or any of the drivetrain issues. And the programming for the drive motors and all of that is pretty normal. It's typical kind of like first generation stuff. There's a little bit of disconnect between the front and the rear of this. And to be completely fair, like Jack said, this is not a pure EV car. It's built on a vehicle or a platform that was trying to combine hybridization, gasoline engine, and then of course, electric ability. So you still have a transmission tunnel here that you don't really need in the back. So again, it's compromised. But as it stands, like if you really, really love the Volvo effect, now you have that EV part of it that gets rid of the majority of any issue that you would have had with a Volvo before this. Now, yes, the range is not like the EV6 or, of course, like the Ioniq 5, and those vehicles are much less money than this, and to me, that's the biggest problem. Jack also said the same thing. He's like, this is way too much money for what this is. Something that wasn't a ground-up thing, or like a ground-up design for it to be an EV. He had a ton of issues with software and like consistency in software experience. to me, I've already gone through some of those headaches being a Volvo owner of the past generation cars, and I can make more of an excuse for it. The other thing too is he complained mostly about this is not as quiet as it should be, and I would admit this is not a very quiet cabin. I feel like they need to do some work there with NVH for the price point again, right? I mean, like if this was 45,000, it would be a different story, but at, you know, pushing 60, it's definitely a different thing. Now, in terms of drivability, when you start to hustle this, like I said about kind of the recharge models where you had the hybridization, the brakes are hyperactive. It's a very, very stiff pedal, and it's hard to modulate them. I think it's just too stiff. I'd like to feel it be a little bit more natural. Steering is pretty quick. It makes it feel nimble, and of course this is a small car, so it had better be nimble, honestly, to be real about it. The last thing really to talk about again is ride quality, suspension setup, and then acceleration. So to about a normal speed, like 80 miles an hour, aside from the wow factor of getting thrown back from the torque, this really does pull very, very hard all the way up until like 80 miles an hour, where you're gonna need to get on the highway. Nobody is ever gonna complain about the acceleration from this. Now, what they might complain about a little bit is it feels like you're sitting on top of this car. It feels like you're riding on top of it, and it is a little bit stiffer than I expected. I feel like it could use a more compliant ride for what this is, and I know this isn't trying to be like a luxury boat, but again, it is a little bit stiff. So that's one thing you're going to want to test out when you do a test drive and see, hey, you know, is this a soft enough ride for me? I like the fact that it feels more nimble, but to me, the overall impressions are this is a really good in-between product, but for the price, it's a very hard sell, and I think a lot of people are going to say that. But let's just get right into the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the C40 EV. By the end of this video, even though it's shorter, you know the point. This is a bridge product for Volvo between their old products and their new cars. And I would say if I could take this drivetrain, the EV motors and the battery pack, and expand the battery pack size a bit and put it in an XC60 or an XC90, I'd be back to being a Volvo customer, because it resolves the biggest issue with their existing products, and that's their drivetrains. Their four cylinders are very stressed, they're complicated, and this gets rid of a lot of that. And it's way faster, it's way smoother, it's way quieter, it does everything you want it to do. The problem is the price. The problem is this isn't a ground up dedicated EV car, so you feel it, you notice it. So to me, you don't buy this. You lease it 100%. If you can get a good lease deal, you buy this, you use it for 2 to 3 years until the newer products come out, and you switch to that if you love Volvos, because the interior space is still really good, even though it feels a little bit on the cheaper side compared to their luxury products. The usability is great, electronics aside. I think they're in the right direction, but they need to fix a few things. These got to be quieter. They have to be way quieter on the inside. The stability of the infotainment, which has always been an issue here, but should have been resolved with Android Automotive, is not sorted out. And if you're an iOS user like Jack and you care about infotainment, you're going to be like, I'm out of here. That's how unstable it was. Being an Android user, there's still some bugs that should have been, again, it should be way faster than it is. Usability should be better. Okay, so you get over that. I think it's an overall like 70 to 80th percentile type product. I like driving. I can see if you're a city user, it's a smaller platform, smaller size. It does everything that you kind of want it to do. And you know, if you have charging infrastructure, you know, the 200 plus mile range is more than adequate here for most people. So again, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll try the XC40 recharge pretty soon and get back to you. Thanks for watching.